It's a warm and sunny day in suburbia, a normal suburban street. And walking down this normal suburban street is an unusual looking young man. 6'4". The height means that he can stretch and look over garden fences. As he's incredibly nosy, this is incredibly useful. Now, this unusual-looking young man, Alexander Benedict, not only is he tall, but he's colourful. Long dreadlocks, a leather satchel stuffed with oddities, hands stuffed into pockets, pockets filled with useful implements like bits of string, a rubber band, perhaps a notebook filled with sketchings of dragons. This young man looks as though he's lived, been on adventures, and collected the stories around him. A juxtaposition to the buildings that he's walking past. A normal, straightforward suburban street. Nothing unusual here. And as the young man walks down the street, the sun blazing, he stops and he goes back a few paces. And he looks over a particular garden fence. Behind the garden fence is an average house with an average door. But the garden is not so average. What has caught our adventurer's eye, Alexander Benedict, is the glisten and the gleam. In the centre of the garden is a rockery, but rockeries normally consisting of rocks and flowers. This rockery is different, because the rockery, well, they're not rocks. Instead, glistening in the light of the sun, there is a particular bright shininess to these rocks. The shininess that perhaps you'll see on a morning just after you've brushed your teeth, as your teeth glint after that first fresh brushing. And Alex stops and he double takes, and he thinks to himself, peering over the fence, that there is something unusual about these gleaming white stones. And he realises that he's seen them before. He's seen images of these sorts of stones before, but they weren't referred to as stones. No, they were referred to as teeth, dragon's teeth. As he was plummeting into the recesses of the libraries in Rome, researching his subject, he'd spotted images like this before, drawings of dragon teeth, and he's certain that these are exactly they, that gleaming white of a dragon's tooth. And as he stands looking over the fence, staring at the rockery, he realises that it wouldn't hurt to go and knock on the door and to ask, are they dragon teeth? Walking up the ordinary garden path, he knocks on the door. To no avail. He rings the doorbell. And as the doorbell sounds inside the house, the door creaks open. And in the sunlight stands an ordinary man. The kind of man that you would walk past in the street, the kind of man that you would never notice in a crowd. He has standard hair, standard face, normal beard, average height, standard clothes. There's nothing unusual nor noteworthy about this man. Someone that you would just walk straight past. And as Alex stares, the man looks at him and asks if he can be of any help. And Alex starts to explain there is something in the garden that he's really quite intrigued by. And he looks at the man and with eager eyes he says, "Oh, your rockery." And the man looks to Alex. "My rockery." "Oh, well, you better come in then." Ushering Alex into this normal house through a normal hallway, into a normal living room. He's seated onto a sofa which is just ever so slightly uncomfortable. Handed a cup of tea. The tea is beige. It's not good tea. It's not Yorkshire tea. And he's handed a biscuit. Now, these biscuits, they are, as with everything around him, normal. Digestives. And taking a biscuit, Alex holds it in his hand, the teacup steadied, and he looks to the man for an answer. "Your rockery. I'm sure I've seen those sorts of rocks somewhere before, but they weren't called rocks." And the man looks at Alex steadily, coldly in the eye, and says, "What do you know of rocks? What do you know of rockeries?" And Alex starts to explain. He's sure they're dragon teeth, and he's really quite excited because he's seen pictures of dragon teeth before, but how did the man come across them? And if they are dragon teeth, then whose dragon teeth? And why in a rockery, of all things? But they are beautiful there. And as Alex gets overly excited, the man stares, and his eyes start to change. From ordinary and boring, his eyes start to light up, and a fire builds within them. And he looks to Alex. You said dragon. And Alex says, yes, I truly believe that dragons exist. I've been hunting the world, trying to find signs of them, but I'm ever so late sometimes, and I just find elements. I'm yet to meet a dragon, but I'm certain they exist. And the man laughs. Don't be so daft. Of course dragons don't exist. And Alex is like, no, really. He'd been asked this question so many times before, and every time he'd explained that he understands it's his belief. It doesn't mean that the man has to share it, but he is certain that dragons exist. Seeing the fervence and the determination in Alex, the man's eyes grow warmer and warmer, and without changing his clothes, without changing his appearance, there is something different about this man. In those seconds, he changes. He almost grows taller. He grows more visible, stronger presence in this ordinary, boring, normal room. You believe in dragons, then? Yes. Alex certainly believes in dragons. Well, then perhaps I should reintroduce myself. And this once ordinary and boring man stands up and goes to shake Alex's hand, and he introduces himself with a name that today I cannot tell you, a name that Alex will never utter aloud, because this name is a magical name, a name that can only be spoken by the owner, and in speaking it, there is magic woven into the world, but it is his name to speak and no one else's. And as this man introduces himself with his true name, he also explains to Alex that he is not an ordinary or boring man. No, he's the Dragon Tooth Fairy. He needs this subterfuge, this double life, so that he at night can sneak out and take the teeth from beneath dragons' nests and change them out for jewels and gems and gold. And Alex's eyes light up, the fire in them grows and grows, and his passions burn to know more, to understand further. To have met a dragon tooth fairy is incredible. And as this man's presence overwhelms the room, as he grows to fit the space, Alex becoming excited, the man explaining, well, perhaps better to explain in situ. Would you like to see the dragon's teeth? Now, that's a stupid question. Of course, if ever you're asked, would you like to see dragon teeth, you automatically say yes. And the man walks silently through the house, leading Alex out to the garden. In Alex's excitement, he's bustling around, he's knocking off surfaces. And as he gets out toward the garden, he notices that this man has made no sound. Where Alex has ricocheted and nearly knocked vases over, this man has walked silently. And into the garden they go, and this garden, to all intents and purposes, is, as with the house, normal. And they get to the garden shed. Alex is expecting the door to open and all wonder to break loose. But as they open up the shed door, what's inside the shed is a lawnmower. Because, of course, that's what you keep in a shed. And as the lawnmower is moved to a side, old chairs at the back wall put to a side, the man takes a key hidden from somewhere in his clothing. And Alex looks around, confused. There's no door within the shed. But as the key appears in front of him, in the hands of the man, there is a small keyhole emerging from the woodwork of the back wall. And the key goes into the knots of the wood, into the keyhole. It clicks, and a door creaks open. As the door swings open in front of him, Alex stands shocked. Because there's a whole room. This room is 3, 4, 5 times the size of the shed. Alex runs outside, walks round the shed to see if it's a hidden room, but he can't see anything. Coming back into the shed, he sees the man grinning in the doorway, laughing. It's not a TARDIS. There's no time, space, dimensions here. It's just a good bit of fairy magic. And that magic works perfectly. This room hidden, and it is a room of wonder. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves stacked with old leather-bound books, the smell overwhelming. And every corner are trinkets, curiosities, weird-looking pieces of machinery, odd oddities. The room is stuffed with paraphernalia and curiosities. Looking into the room, Alex's eyes gobbling up every single corner, and stacked everywhere are teeth. Some teeth are framed and hung on the wall, others stood next to bookshelves, others filling the shelves. Teeth of all sizes and shapes and colourings. And in the centre of the room, in this cosy chamber of wonder, are two comfy leather-backed chairs, very different from the sofa he'd sat on only a few moments ago. And he's offered another cup of tea, a proper cup of tea, a Yorkshire cup of tea. And with the Yorkshire cup of tea firmly in his hand, the eagerness building inside him, he's offered another biscuit. Of course, this time it's not a digestive, it's not a boring biscuit. Instead, it's a good biscuit. It's a bourbon, or at least that's my preferred biscuit type. And as they sit there, biscuits held tight, teacups clasped, the dragon tooth fairy, this man starts to explain to Alex his adventures, starts to explain how he became a dragon tooth fairy. 157 years ago, when the man was young, because you must remember that fairy time and human time are quite different. So for us, he looks 40, but actually he's incredibly old. He'd been sent to Japan, which is where you learn about being a dragon tooth fairy. It seems an unusual location, but it makes perfect sense when you think about it. The tooth fairy of the human world has little danger. Instead, that tooth fairy only has to take out the baby milk teeth from under the pillow of sleeping children and replace it with perhaps a 20p or 50p, though, as far as the tooth fairy is concerned, interest rates have changed and now children expect a folding note. But for a dragon tooth fairy, that exchange is more dangerous. You do not want to wake a sleeping dragon. And though many dragons are friendly and would be excited to meet the dragon tooth fairy, still it has to be done with stealth and care. And in Japan, he learnt all about stealth. He learnt not only how to be a dragon tooth fairy, but how to be a ninja. What better way to sneak into dragon lairs than in that ninja guise? And learning to be a ninja, he learnt to walk silently. Alex had noticed this before, his capacity to walk without sound. And he explains that some of that is helped by the rice in the bottom of his shoes, dumbing his footstep. But that silence is a skill learnt over many years. And with the silence and the stealth, he sneaks into dragon lairs. And not all dragons want to exchange their teeth for gold. There is a certain type of dragon that actually much prefers red jelly babies, but that's a different story for another day. And as he stands there, as they sit there, Alex hears of all of the learning what to do with dragons, how best to not be noticed in their lairs, and also, most importantly, all about their dental plans. There are some dragons that lose their teeth as they grow older. Learning to breathe fire, the teeth fall out as the first elements of fire take hold, but then those teeth that grow back in are hardened, steely. And as the dragon tooth fairy explains all of his learning, all of the years spent in Japan, he starts to get overly excited, telling Alex more and more about what it is to be a ninja and what teeth he's discovered, how his last task in Japan had been to go down into the lairs of the water dragon. He needed to be able to hold his breath for so long. But again, that's a story for another day, because as the shadows start to fall, the man starts to look tentatively into the corner. There is something in that corner that is catching his eye. A shadow, hung on a hat stand, a clothes, a garb of shadows and night. And as the man looks tentatively into that corner, he explains to Alex he needs to wear that tonight so that he can hide among the shadows. It's a myth that the ninjas just wear black. Instead, they would wear dark greys and blues, colours more natural to our night surroundings, so that they could fade into the darkness. And as Alex looks at that shadowed clothing, as the man starts to look more and more nervous, the man explains Alex is welcome to come back. Living as a dragon tooth fairy means that he has very few friends. Very few people know of his duplicitous life. But he has to keep this secret. Because can you imagine if people found out that a dragon tooth fairy was living down the street? And that's why by day he pretends to be an ordinary, normal, boring man. By day he pretends to be a dentist. It's where his knowledge bases lies. But by night he puts on this shadowy garb and he goes out into the world and he exchanges dragon teeth for jewels and gifts. Alex is welcome to come back and hear more of his stories, but for now he must leave because the time is drawing when the Tooth Fairy needs to put on his shadowed cloak and go out into the world. It would be awful to disappoint baby dragons. So as Alex is ushered out of this fantastical room, the man presses a present into his hand, a tooth, one of the first teeth that he ever collected, and he asks Alex to keep it safe and precious. And he explains to Alex as he leaves that yes, tell people about the Dragon Tooth Fairy, tell people that he exists, but he may not tell people his name. He may not tell people where he's to be found, but allow people to realise that there is so much magic in this world that we just walk past. Because this man, you may have walked past him, I may have walked past him, and we would never have known that by night what wonder he causes. And as Alex leaves the room in the shed, he has another thing pressed into his hand, the tooth carefully wrapped in velvet in his pocket, but the note that is pressed into his hand, the man explains he must read as he walks out the garden gate. And tentatively saying goodbye and what a pleasure it was to meet Alex, the man closes the shed door behind him, and the shed suddenly becomes normal. Walking past the lawnmower, out of the garden and up the garden path, looking back at this normal, boring house, Alex sneakily smiles to himself. The sun no longer glinting on the rockery that had drawn him in, but rather the moonlight illuminating those teeth. And as he walks down the quiet suburban street, Alex's heart pounding with the excitement of the meeting. It had gone too quick, but he'll be back. He wants to hear more about the Japanese water dragons, more about the dragons' different dental care plans. And as he walks away, he opens up the note in his hand, and as darkness falls, he reads the note. In bold letters, it states, "Here is my address. Learn it. And remember, tell no one my name. Tell no one where I live. But tell them my story. Make them realize that there is magic in this world." And as he remembers the address, as it filters into his brain, said over and over in the stillness of that night, the note starts to shake in his hand, and Alex notices small words at the bottom. Keep this secret. Keep it safe. And as the note starts to rumble in his fingertips, it starts to move of its own accord. Be aware that this note will disappear once you've learnt the address. And as the address fixes in his brain, the note shaking between his fingers, Alex sees the note and the numbers at the bottom of the page. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Poof. And the note disappears into the darkness of the night.